Hey, welcome to my 5-Minute Friday for August 18th. Actually got a special guest here, Dr. Housley. How you doing?
Doing well. How's it going, Joe? It's good to see you. It's been a bit.
Yeah, been a bit. Welcome back to Salt Lake. So we're just hanging out at my house right now. We're actually going to have a barbecue and probably record a few more podcasts with the guests showing up here. But yeah, I think different 5-Minute Friday. We'll just kind of rant about whatever is on Matt and I's mind for a bit. So Matt, what have you been thinking about lately?
So I've been actually writing a blog post, and I'll get this out eventually, I think, but it's about the difference between professional NIMBYism versus professional standards. And
what do you mean by NIMBYism?
Okay, so probably most of you are familiar with the notion of NIMBYism, which is not in my backyard, which is I don't want anyone building anything near me. And it's a big problem in cities because if you don't have enough housing, then apartments cost like $4,000 a month or something, right?
Hey, sounds like some cities that people don't like.
Like a few cities that we know of.
Yeah.
So there's this whole other movement that is like, yes, in my backyard, which is let's build things instead. Try to build them in a reasonable way, but build more housing so there are places for people to live. Okay, so professional NIMBYism is related, and that is, to me, where maybe an established generation of professionals, especially in the tech industry, don't want new people coming in and doing things a new way. And they complain loudly about people who try to do things according to a new standard or with new technology. And in fact, what I've seen in many cases is they just won't hire people who have new sets of skills. They'll reject their resumes basically out of hand because they have newer skills. So one example I was telling Joe about earlier is during the peak of the Hadoop era, you had these like hardcore data engineers who would basically say things like, well, you have to program with MapReduce in Java. And if you do anything else, then it's not real data.
Yeah, you're not like a real man.
You're not really like a real man, right?
Yeah.
And where is that now? Like, where are those people now in terms of job development?
I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, we know several people like that. I would say quite a few. I think you just ultimately have to reinvent yourself, right?
Do.
Or maybe you kind of do the tour to all the shops that are still on Hadoop and can't leave for some reason. So then you become kind of like a COBOL programmer. But
exactly,
the NIMBYism's an interesting thing, though. I do see this as well.
Yeah.
It's a lot of gatekeeping.
Yep.
So I was actually writing an article about this, kind of related to it. Did you ever watch Kung Fu Theater when you were a kid in the 80s?
No, I was not that cool in the 80s or even now. So.
You're probably cooler back then. I'm just kidding. But so Kung Fu Theater, I used to watch it a lot. I think it was on USA, the channel there. But there was, every Sunday or whatever, they'd show Kung Fu movies. I don't know, it's fun to watch. But I was thinking about this in the context of data because I make these like very weird mental leaps. Obviously, these are connected. So very obviously.
We've both been making weird mental leaps, but go on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of the notion that I think that, it's in a similar vein that you're talking about, where I feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to practices, right? And so, and I notice this, people selfishly guard their practices and dismiss other people. And I know this is in the context of data modeling, for example, right? So it's like you have different ways of, modeling data, architecting systems, and each of these are like very closely guarded. What does that have to do with Kung Fu Theater? Well, in Kung Fu Theater, in these movies, you typically have Shaolin monks that are all, kind of hidden away in the mountains, and they practice their Kung Fu, and they're the only ones that have, this particular style, and the style is incredibly deadly. They can't show it to anybody because it'll obviously just be too dangerous to reveal. And I notice this feels a lot like the data world, where there's just, I would say, practitioners, all around the world who have developed or worked in certain ways, and to them this is like the one true way, but they're kind of dicks about it in terms of I think how they interact with other people, and so it is definitely a form of NIMBYism as well, right? I kind of like the NIMBY term when it comes to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think professional standards, so the difference between NIMBYism and professional standards is that professional standards are not about trying to block people from doing things in a new way or trying to block people from acquiring knowledge. Instead, it's about bringing people together within the community.
What are some examples of professional standards you're thinking of?
One thing we've talked about a lot, actually, is that most of the complaints about the modern data stack come down to just a lack of any approach to data modeling, any approach to data governance, any approach to the traditional parts of data. And the part of like being more flexible about data, I fully embrace, but I also think that people who come onto the modern data stack with no experience should just get more training. It's just very helpful to have more perspective.
It is, I know, it's absolutely that. That's, think I wrote an article about that a bit ago, where it's like there's we have no shortage of tools,
Right.
but I think our ability to use these tools is still pretty shite.
Yep.
So yeah, no, definitely in the same vein. And I don't know if I don't know if there will be professional standards for data. So there's arguments for and against it. But if data is, quote, the new oil, as the cliche goes, and if it's that important, maybe it's worth considering standards. I don't know what that looks like.
Maybe standards is not the right term. We're kind of brainstorming here, but maybe just like more training. Standards does sound like gatekeeping, which I don't like in general, but like just more training and more community.
Well, in Utah, for example, you had to get a license to cut hair.
To cut hair, to like do a manicure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, real important stuff. But, you can obviously go and, spin up expensive cloud resources and, mine data to your heart's content,
Right.
and all this kind of stuff, right? So these are interesting, hurdles or standards that we set for ourselves.
Well, and I think the problem is that it's sort of poisoning the well with respect to the modern data stack. And I don't love the term modern data stack. I've been vocal about that. But just that this tool set is around to stay, right? We're going to continue using Snowflake. We're going to continue using Databricks and BigQuery and these other tools. But CFOs are getting very upset about out-of-control bills. There are data governance problems. There are data privacy problems. And none of these things are inherent to the tools themselves. They're just the need to actually build standards and create community and practices.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And so I think that's where, back to the NIMBY argument, back to Kung Fu Theater, it's I just hope people are more open with their ideas and their practices, right? I think that's what's going to push the industry forward. I think all this gatekeeping nonsense, NIMBYism, I think it holds the industry back a lot, because we evolved by the adoption of ideas and better practices. I feel like actually in the last 10 years, from a practices standpoint, I think we actually went backwards, to a large degree. I mean, the idea of having like hardware constraints, for example, made you really focus on things that mattered. Now you can just gratuitously throw, any amount of power at your problem and solve it that way. But I think, when you do that, you don't need to think as hard about what you're trying to do.
Well, I mean, in general, I think that hardware optimization is less important than it used to be, but pricing optimization is much more important. So in other words, if I use ephemeral resources and I'm just using them in a very inefficient way, but I'm using interruptible resources that are very cheap, then great. Like, it's very efficient from my CFO standpoint. I'm just killing it. Whereas if I don't optimize for anything, those cloud bills can just get completely out of control.
And the one big constraint we always have is money, right? Even in the times of, when money was falling from the sky back when 0% interest rates, it's still, people still budgeted to some extent, right? So I think the hard constraint is always cost, and and I think the way you manage costs is you get better at what you're doing. I think that we've seen this, and I think it's almost a tautology. It's not a matter of using tools at this point. I mean, you have enough tools. You need to learn how to use them better. So anyway, I feel like I'm reiterating now, but
no,
it's fine.
I think that pretty much covers it. I mean,
pretty much covers it.
Looking forward to the conversation we have around this going forward. So,
yeah. Cool. All right, Matt. Well, thanks for hanging out. I think we're getting ready for a party here.
I'm looking forward to some smoked ribs. So.
We're gonna be really good. So, all right. Have a good weekend, everybody. See ya.
Take care.
Bye bye.